Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Sporer with ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals. And it's my pleasure today to invite Paul Taylor to tell us about his amazing new book with Business Expert Press, Emerging Fintech. So Paul, welcome. And I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and tell us about your new book.
Yes, it's wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thank you for fitting me into your busy schedule. What I'll probably do is, before I dive into the detail, I'll probably just share a slide. So hopefully, if I can work the technology out, you should be able to see a slide pack now. Jim, if you can tell me,
Indeed,
you
we
can see
can.
that.
Yep.
That's brilliant. So I will use the slide pack as a background to the discussion, but obviously, if there's any questions, please raise them. So the book itself is called Emerging Fintech, Understanding and Maximising Their Benefits, as Jim said earlier. I think before I dive into detail, just a little bit of background to me. So I wonder who this strange man from England is on the call. So the background to me, I've been working in, well, actually nearly 35 years now in the industry across primarily financial services, which obviously, because I'm based in London, in England, and that's obviously one of the main providers down there. But I've done a lot of work for charities and other educational and professional bodies, and particularly around change management, direction, and obviously technology. I'm also a chair and a non-exec director for various social commercial enterprises around performing arts, gambling, addiction awareness, book reviews, financial services. And I've also published a number of books, actually. This Emerging FinTech book is actually my fifth book I've published. But I've also done general speaking and lecturing across a number of subjects: change management, technology, emerging technology, and financial services, plus many others. So what I did was, the way I was going to sort of structure this was almost in four sort of sequential parts. I wanted to sort of maybe talk through at the beginning why I wrote this book, probably explain some of the method in the madness. And the book itself looks at why it's primarily around emerging technology. It basically looks at two sort of like interlocking ideas. The one is all the future challenges for financial technology, and it looks at emerging technology trends with a view, how can these new emerging technology trends actually help the future for financial services? For example, one of the issues that financial services has at the moment is around cost management, i.e. they spend too much money. And then basically the argument is, how can the new emerging technologies reduce reduce cost management or help costs be managed better? So that will cover two or three. The book itself obviously talks a lot of detail about all the emerging trends, but I won't have enough time to go through that within the confines of this presentation. But what I will do at the end, there are a number of key themes that come out at the very end, which sort of like run through the book, which I will obviously do a summary at the end under point 4. But the first thing, right, why did I write this book? So without saying the complete obvious, financial services is a massive user of technology, whether you're a bank, asset manager, insurance firm, or building society in the UK, or whatever you do. You cannot run a financial services firm without technology. And it's got a long history. And one of the things that the book discuss is gives a little potted history of technology and how it's used. And I thought it was grouped into 4 phases, like prehistoric. I was going to call it pre-Jurassic, but I think I would have got in trouble with the lawyers. When original use of technologies in the 70s, and then moves on to automation, how technology was there to manually automate manual tasks, which run up to sort of like the 70s to the mid 90s, and then mid 90s to the mid 2005. It was very much around going online. That's when the internet went absolutely mad. Everything was online, and if you weren't online, you were going to die, which didn't quite happen, obviously, but there was very much along the line. But one of the interesting threads that come out of the book is that from 2005 onwards, roughly, technology is now almost allowed clients to take the lead, where previously financial services, you almost just dictate to their clients what would happen. But now going forward, the clients very much saying, we want our services, we want 24-hour access to our app services, we want to be able to do bank transfers when I'm on the train, therefore give me an app. Where previously, as before, is you walk into the branch and do the transfer then. So everything is starting to come around 180 degrees, where the client's now leading it. So therefore, it's very safe to say that financial services has driven technology, and vice versa, financial and technology has driven financial services. However, interesting thing, despite the total reliance on technology in financial services is really, rarely implemented fully successfully. Yeah, I mean, I've listed 5 or 6 items down there, but this is, I mean, you could write pages on this stuff. It doesn't work. It doesn't provide the benefits. It costs too much. It was delivered late. It was too complex, and millions of these, and I won't even go into all of them. And this is despite an entire industry being in place to support implementing technology and covering things like consultants, books, training, software firms, what have you. And this is quite embarrassing for me, actually, because I'm one of these consultants. So obviously I could argue that I'm a part of the problem, not implementing it properly. And also, well, that's at the current stage, technology is implemented very poorly. But looking forward, financial services under a large number of pressures. And there's a couple of slides on this later on. You know, for example, rising costs, profitability issues, regulation, a lack of trust. So financial services, you know, quite deserved in some ways, an industry under a lot of pressure. Also, in the same way, technology is expanding with a number of growing emerging trends. For example, you know, cloud computing, big data, natural language processing, excuse me, Internet of Things. So there's a large number as well of new technology emerging trends that are coming out. So therefore, one of the cruxes, the real crux of the book then, as I mentioned earlier, is that the argument is that the use of these new successful emerging technology trends should be help financial services with their future challenges. For example, how can a new emerging technology trends such as big data and cloud computing, how can that help with cost management? How can remote working or client servicing help with profitability? And that's really where the sort of like if you can imagine, like the interjection or the crossroads of the book works. Therefore, as I mentioned before, the book tries to take a critical review of these emerging technologies and explore how they can be used in financial services. And first of all, for each of the sort of technology trends, which again I'll come to in a sec, it basically walks through and it tries to explain what the technologies are. It's very easy for people to misunderstand what these technologies are. I think we've all had about 44,000 million different versions of what big data is. Cloud computing is often misused. Machine learning can mean many different things to many different people. So initially, for each of the technology trends, we try to look at what each the technology trend is. And then we also, for each of these trends, then try and say, how can they be used and provide real benefit? For example, if a firm was to use big data, or a financial services firm, more precisely, use big data, what can you use it for? For example, can you use it to model clients? Can it use to manage, understand costs? Can it get insights into its clients? In the same way, if a client wants to use machine learning techniques, how can it use it? What's the real benefit of it? And because there is a tendency, and I've worked at firms that are as guilty as this, is they get carried away with the technology without actually understanding what can actually real business benefit it can do. Then it looks at a series of pragmatic steps how to implement the technology. Again, most of this is taken from personal experience, mostly bad actually, unfortunately, of where I've worked on technology projects, for example, remote working technology projects or robotic process automation technology projects that have gone woefully wrong. And I look at the options and step back and think, well, what went wrong? What on earth did we do to make it so bad? And I look at a number of pragmatic tips to say, well, if you're going to implement this technology, here's almost like a checklist in a way of what to do and what not to do. And also, finally, once we've worked out what the technologies are, proper definition, find out what benefits they can offer to the businesses or financial services, how they can be implemented. We then look at these technologies and compare them against the future challenges to say, how can they actually help the future challenges of the industry? Okay, so basically that's why I wrote the book. Again, it's more of a passionate view of mine, really, having worked in the industry for many years, and also a passionate fan of technology, to say is why basically surely these new emerging technology trends can make financial services better, and we all use financial services products, makes our life better for the future. So the future challenges, and these again, I'll do a very quick summary of what the future challenges are. The first, and let's go random. The first one is financial services firms are under immense regulatory pressures, particularly in the EU, especially in the UK as well, as post-Brexit, a lot of EU firms have got to follow UK rules and EU rules in Europe. No doubt the same in America, Canada. I've worked with Canadian firms, US firms, some Argentinian, Peruvian firms. The regulation is unbearably complex and often contradictory. So therefore, that's a future challenge. Another future challenge is that clients are getting far more knowledgeable about financial services. Bigger clients are actually employing financial services experts to make sure they're getting the best. So effectively, clients are now far more demanding and much more knowledgeable. Financial products such as insurance products or mutual funds or banking accounts or overdrafts. There's a horrible contradiction here, or a paradox, is that firms are being asked to provide very, very detailed, complex products which are very cheap and easy to understand. So you've almost got a contradiction here. So there's a lot of products out there that firms need to sort of basically get their products to a decent stage. Another area is that financial firms are still not trusted. And particularly in the UK, every time Boris Johnson, who's our Prime Minister at the time of speaking, does anything bad, he's often always calls of looking after his banker friends. Since the credit crunch, I don't think it's going to take a long while for financial services firms to be trusted. Data is the more and more complex data. Obviously, you need data on bank accounts, on your clients to operate the day-to-day running of the firms. Again, much more pressure on now, and this is only going to get worse, especially new requirements. Operating models, like this is effectively the processes, the people, and the systems that support the day-to-day running of the firms. These are often sort of like a patchwork quilt of different systems, different firms, different technologies, different offices, different outsourced models. Very complicated, very messy. Basically means it's very hard and very costly to run, and doesn't really provide the support for the rest of the industry. Profit and loss. I can't speak for the US, but I can't think of any asset managers who are a charity at the moment. So they're always most of them are listed firms or actually have a financial owner. So there was always some pressure there to generate some profit and some cost. Minimize the cost and generate profit. Changing, I mean, this workforce one is probably quite a generic one. There's the changing nature of the workforce. There's more and more people now wanting to work from home post-COVID. In Europe and the UK and America, I'm sure, and I know in Australia in particular, there's a lot of legislation around diversity and inclusion. And therefore, the firms need to be able to ensure that going forward, their workforce is diverse. A, because more diverse workforces are actually better, and B, you've got the legal risk. If you don't do it, you could be in serious trouble. And on the competition side, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, this sort of links all these together, is that firms are more competitive. There's new entrants coming in. For example, you've got a lot in the UK at the moment, particularly you've got a lot of new, they call them starter banks appearing, who are starting up from a brand new, almost blue sky, almost completely new. And to cut long story short, they don't have any of the legacy that goes with the larger firms. So therefore, they're quick, they're nimble, they can get services. They're often online. They don't have expensive. So there's a lot of good competition for consumers, but not very good always for some of the older firms. And we've got down there risk management. Again, one of the big issues that caused the credit crunch is that firms, or financial services firms in that case, didn't really manage their risk profile. They had massive open-ended liabilities and massive financial risks. They didn't really understand them, and if they didn't understand them, they can't monitor them. So if you can, and was obviously in the end caused almost a meltdown of the world for those who can remember very scary times. So looking at there, you can see a number of future challenges for financial services. If you sort of bear that mind in as I go into the next slide. And as I said, the book will look at these financial services and trends or the future challenges under 2, and then look at the emerging technology trends in section 3 to try and see whether they can comply and address them. Again, first one around remote working. Many pre-COVID-19, very few people used to work remotely, but now financial services firms need to build a very complex infrastructure to allow remote working, home working. Again, it's the part of the brave new world post-COVID-19. There is no other way around it. Self-servicing, as I mentioned earlier on, nowadays clients, whether they're institutional clients or one-man band or a government, want the ability to service their own products remotely. They don't want to go into a branch. They don't want to speak to somebody. They want a browser. They want a web app. They want an iPhone pad or iPad type application to do it. So therefore, these firms will need to bring that in, and this is a new trend that should be able to help. Machine learning. Again, this is a very, very vague term, or not vague term, terms that are used around machine learning. A lot of firms I work with say do machine learning. To me, it's not machine learning, it's just data analysis. But if you do machine learning very, very well, you can improve your customer servicing, you can make yourself trading much more effective, and you can also do things like reduce costs. Robotic process automation is the fourth one. Somebody called it workflow light. A lot of firms are looking to automate manual tasks. They haven't got the money or the time or even the appetite to do massive developments. So think and saying if you can lay a process automation layer on top of something, you can automate tasks. Internet of Things. Again, this is a excuse me. This is a not actually that popular with financial services firms, but I know a number of branches. The idea is you can plug anything into the internet and you can monitor it and you can get feedback on the internet, good for collecting data. Natural language processing, again, this is another trend. It's very much along the lines of firms being able to automate call centers and contact centers by listening, inverted commas, to customers and speaking back to them, reducing obviously the volume of people they need, and also making sure everything's almost 365 days a year. Currencies or digital currencies, where you've got like centralized, decentralized. This itself is an absolute minefield at the moment. Particularly in the UK, actually, the Bank of England, who looks after the the regulator in the UK, are looking at a digital version of the pound. But again, it's a very interesting area that firms need to be aware of, because if their clients want to do digital currencies, they'll have to do digital currencies. Cloud computing, again, one of these great ideas that came out, but the devil's in the detail. For example, firms are looking to move everything to the cloud, which is fine, but I've worked on a number of projects where there have been major technical issues running packages on the cloud, and even one supplier of a software package refused their product to be moved on the cloud because they were worried that the software code was going to be stolen by the cloud provider. Big data, again, another trend that's been bouncing around, another term that's hopelessly misused all the time. Big data relates obviously to the volume of the data, the changing of the data, and the different types of data. Firms, especially some of these large retail banks or insurance firms, have got an absolute shed load of data, so they can use big data to model costs, model client behaviour, and along those lines. And the last item here, which is arguably possibly the most important one, is, with the massive issues around climate change appearing, a lot of firms are now looking at making their computing technology green. And that can be anything from eco-friendly PCs and laptops, and putting laptops into sleep mode when not being used. I've even worked at a firm who actually used to take the heat out of their data center to heat the staff swimming pool. It's all around recycling and being green and what have you, which is, in a strange way, probably the most important technology trend there is. So what the book would do, it would then run through, it would merge, look at the future challenges for financial services, and then look at how whether each of those can be actually helped or hindered by the technology trends. There's a lot of detail against this in the book, obviously I won't run through. But there is there is actually like a summary of key points that are almost like, if you can imagine, cut across all the different technology trends, which I'll quickly run you through. The first one is that firms need a clear business reason to implement any technology. Don't implement technology for the sake of it. Make sure it provides some sort of benefit to meet your strategy, whether it's increasing revenue or cutting costs or other. Technology or new technology be implemented gradually. New technology is like a new thing. You need to learn its personality. You need to learn its good points. You need to learn its bad points. So therefore, don't rush it. Small steps are much better. Do not understand the regulatory side of technology. I know when I worked at my previous place for a large firm in Australia, the Australian regulators were strict about big data and where data is stored, and a lot of firms in Australia were struggling because they had to redo their cloud computing because the regulations had changed. So don't forget the landscape is very complex. Cyber risk. Despite all these fantastic movements in emerging technology, there is a massive cyber risk challenge. if you self-servicing, you're opening up your systems to the world, and people will try and break in, whether they want to break in for criminal reasons or they just want to do it because they think they can do it. Beware. And there was also other risks apart from cyber risk. New technology is knowledge risk. You may rely on suppliers to provide the new emerging technology, so you've got supplier risk and many other things. So like most things, a new emerging technology actually fixes one set of problems, but with cyber risk and other risks, it creates different problems. New skills and capabilities required. This is not just at the technical level, trying to understand, for example, how machine learning works or understanding how remote working works. You need knowledge at all levels of the organization. So the senior people in the organization understand what the real risks are, what the real issues are, and also they understand what the benefits are. So, it's like learning anything. You need to have a good holistic view of it. Fortunately, staff will lose their jobs as part of new technology implementation. When it's implemented, this needs to be managed. In various jurisdictions around the world, there's very strict rules about making staff redundant, and they mustn't be forgotten, otherwise you'll end up in court. Make sure you've got a robust infrastructure to support the new technologies. If you're running something like self-servicing applications based on natural language processing, make sure that you've actually got it in place, and you've got backup servers, backup operations, and also think about with this, if the NLP modules fail completely, then do you have enough people to cope with the telephone calls? Data is more key than it was originally, which I mentioned many times earlier in this, thing. And also the final thing is new technologies have social acceptance issues. For example, some people are still very uncomfortable speaking to a machine, as they say, for natural language processing, and I would put myself into that. Even now, I still would rather speak to a person. And it took my father many years to use an ATM machine. So while these new technologies sound good, customers may not use them for a while. So again, they need to be taken on a journey of acceptance and happiness. Okay, so that covers everything I was going to plan to do. So the book itself, as you can see, as I've subtly put on every single page, a copy of the cover. I highly recommend it, obviously, because I wrote it, but there is a good book, and I've enjoyed writing it. And there's a hell of a lot of detail in there based on my experience and obviously speaking to other people in the industry. Obviously, if you want to discuss anything else in more detail, I'll put my details on the side. So I've got an email address, my website, the telephone number there is a UK number, so apologies. So you need to put 44 and then drop the first 07801 on. I've also got my LinkedIn profile there. If you would like to LinkedIn to me, that'd be fantastic. And I've also got my Twitter handle there as well. If you want to do follow me on Twitter or send me messages on Twitter. So therefore, I'll hand you back to Jim, and thank you for listening. And I hope you found the book interesting and the presentation interesting as well.
Perfect. Hey, leave this slide up while we do the questions. This will be good if people need to remember anything or jot it down. So Paul, thank you so much. Amazingly clear and concise talk, just like your book. I remember as I was reading it, I was amazed at your ability to take mountains and mountains and mountains of differently complex business as well as technological information and really deliver it in a concise, clear way.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. One of the things I did try and write for the book, I wanted the ability for somebody to dip in and dip out, almost like I think I might have even used the word checklist is probably a little bit wrong. It's probably more than a checklist, but it's almost if somebody's thinking about how do I implement big data for a bank, go to Paul's book, chapter 6, work your way down it, or yeah, I wanted to make it a pragmatic, usable book, which is books. Having been working as a consultant myself on this, one has. I just it's just more of a personal taste, to be honest with you. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It, Paul McCartney writes songs he likes. I like to write a book I like.
Yeah. Perfect for Business Expert Press, which is the leader in concise
they were very helpful
books,
with structuring it as well, I must admit. So.
Nice match. I have 2 questions and 2 comments. I'll try to squeeze them in quickly. So which of all of these technologies, which do you think is going to be the one that's going to be the biggest bang for the buck for firms to?
Honestly, I think longer term, I think it's the remote working for staff. I mean, I can only really think from the UK and the European point of view is that there is massive social acceptance now of people working from home and remotely. And I think obviously within reason, obviously not everybody can remote, if some people have to be on site. And I think what you're going to find is that a lot of firms will spend a lot of money to enhance their remote working structure. And longer term, I think firms that probably shut down buildings. I mean, I've never been to your side of America. I've been to Manhattan a few times, which is like a larger version of London to a certain extent, and there's some seriously large properties there.